with Arnie Filko and Cary Grant.
Good evening, everyone. This is Cary Grant, and this is the Let's Elevate Conversations show, the Arnie and Carey show. I'm Cary Grant.
Hey, Cary, good evening. This is Arnie Filko, and
hey, Arnie, how you doing?
I'm doing good. We are separated physically tonight. Cary's in studio, and I had another event in the community, so I am not in studio, but we are excited to be back with you on Elevated Conversations and talking about lots of things. I know we've got a guest we're going to spend some time with tonight, Cary, but lots happening in our community, and I think it would be appropriate to start the show with, our condolences on the passing of Pope Francis yesterday.
Absolutely, yes.
I believe you are of the Catholic faith.
Yes, I am.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And, it was a little bit shocking only in the sense that the Pope had presided on Easter Sunday. And I know the vice president actually had been in Rome, had seen him the day before, and it looked like he was regaining some health, but unfortunately in life things happen, and the Pope passed away on early Monday, I guess it would be.
Yes.
And, and it's seeing the outpouring of love and affection for this Pope. I'm not of the Catholic faith, but what I've always admired about Pope Francis was he was just always for the regular guy and looking out for human values and human dignity and standing up for immigrant rights and other areas. And, that made him a very compassionate Pope that a lot of people, I think, could connect to.
Yeah, and as a Catholic, he was a very hopeful Pope for me. The issues that the Catholic Church is facing, the issues with priest conduct and a lot of other things, he reminded us that it was about faith. He was a man of the people, and as I like to say, a true priest. He would go to the poorest of people. He washed the feet of the prisoners, usually, which is something that popes do with the cardinals and the priests and everything. But he would go and he would walk among the people at night. He was just that type of person. And I think that for the Catholic faith to get back to someone who had just compassion and love for the people was a really important step. I hope that, and unfortunately, of course, everything goes in cycles, but I hope that the next person, then there's a few people who are going to be in the conclave who are people he had mentioned as his successors, who are very much like him. I would hope that the conclave would come up with someone who would carry on some of that part of the faith. I know there's all this stuff about doctrine and everything, but I don't think that's nearly as important as what people felt for him as a person and his compassion and, like you said, his love for the regular people, the people who are downtrodden, the people who are suffering.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially in today's times.
Yes, absolutely.
We need a pope who, no matter what the issue is, can interject some humanity to it and just good love and compassion for people. And, I think a lot of people across the world know a little bit more now about the conclave because of the movie that came out a year ago.
Yeah, yes. Yes.
Obviously it's still a very internal, somewhat secretive process. But I think people have a little bit better understanding of it. And
one thing about that movie, Arnie, and I'll say this, which I read the book years and years ago. That book that it came from is rather old. I can tell you from watching the movie that they kind of juiced that movie up with a lot of the people who are in the conclave right now. So there's some characters in there that I don't remember from the book, but they're kind of like representations of some of the people I'm talking about who are going to be in the conclave and considered. And it's very interesting, like you said, that movie just came out and had a lot of publicity and everything. I'm sure on streaming, everybody's looking at it to see what that's all about. at this point.
I'm sure. Well, it's appropriate tonight, almost to talk a little bit about Pope Francis, because one of his famous, comments was
Yes.
who am I to judge
Yes.
in the context of the LGBTQ plus community and other issues, and we'll get into that with our guest tonight.
And Arnie, Larry's on the line, so that's a
Okay.
perfect segue. We can go right to him. Larry, are you
great.
there?
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Great
Thank
to have you.
It's great to have you, Larry. This is for everybody. This is Larry Bagneris, who is a dear friend of both Carey and myself, and
Absolutely.
somebody that has done incredible work, as we're going to get into tonight, and has a new book that has come out. But Larry, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm terrific. I'm glad you're having me on tonight. I, too, respected the Pope. He's one of the first ones to make me feel part of the Catholic Church. And even though I was never one to run away from issues in terms of difficult issues, I felt the Catholic Church needed some change, and he gave it that change.
Yeah, and Larry, like Arnie said, having read your book, the issues that you talk about your faith and where you grew up at in this city, and the schools you went to, this is a very, very good coincidence of having you on the show on this very day, because you can speak to a lot of those type of issues as well. But I want you to start by giving a little bio of yourself for the few people in New Orleans who may not know who you are, and then we'll segue into what the book's all about.
Actually, I've been an activist since I was 16 years old. I got involved in the civil rights movement, actually, because I had prayed really hard not to be gay.
Yeah.
And when my prayers weren't answered, I went to a psychiatrist who told me he could give me shock treatment.
Oh.
And my prayers were answered on that day when I told him to shove it and walked out of his office on St. Charles Avenue. And since that day, I've been active I was active in the Black Civil Rights Movement, then active in the Women's Rights Movement, and then was blessed to move to Houston with a job that gave me access to a new gay community that I didn't even know existed. And some of the stuff I write about was being reborn again at the Stonewall Inn when there was a raid the May before, the same year in 1969, the famous raid. I was in the bar. They constantly raided gay bars anyway.
Yeah.
And climbing out of the window to get out of the raid, a young man that I had met was showing me how to avoid being arrested. I began to cry, and he said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "This is like West Side Story." I saw West Side Story, and it reminds me, he said, "You better move it, because if you don't, you're going to get arrested." And that whole week there with a professor of mine that was a close friend explained to me that being gay wasn't what it was in New Orleans, that there was multitudes of levels of interactions with people I had never met before. And the Stonewall Inn was my introduction to the gay rights movement, mainly because climbing out of the window, I thought I could fight for civil rights, but unless I solved this problem, nobody in the city knew I was gay. I worked in the post office to pay my way through college, 8 at night to 6:30 in the morning, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
I worked with my dad, and nobody in the post office knew I was gay. Nobody at Xavier knew I was gay. So climbing in through that window, it dawned on me, it's time to figure out how do I deal with this, and I knew there would be a movement for gay rights, having participated in the Black Civil Rights Movement, the Women's Movement, the movement for freedom for Chicanos, mainly Mexican Americans. And for that, in all those participations in all of those different civil rights movements, I learned the process of keeping on.
So let me ask you a question. I read some excerpts from the book, and you just relayed one of them, which was you going to a psychiatrist on St. Charles Avenue, thinking that they could wipe out the gayness, I think is what was said. And the doctor took your money, which was a sizable sum at the time, I guess, and said, you know, the way we're going to deal with this is shock therapy, right?
Right. Which at that time, that was the treatment. Now, mind you, I had done the process of praying for weeks and weeks at St. Peter Claver Church. I did the Stations of the Cross 3 times for 3 years in a row, each Station of the Cross, 3 Stations of the Cross every Friday, begging the Lord to make me straight or non-gay, and thinking that when I made my confirmation, which is a young man becoming a man, just like bar mitzvah, that when the Archbishop tapped me on the face, Archbishop Rummel, that I would be cleared of any desire to be close to men. Rather, I would be inducted into women in terms of feeling comfortable with them. And that didn't happen. And so I knew I was going to St. Aug. I was frightened to death that something would come out. So what I did was I saved up money. I went worked for the priest on the weekends, cleaning bathrooms, painting classrooms, working in the bookstore, running the bookstore, selling keychains and book bags, etc. And once I had $238, I went to the psychiatrist on St. Charles Avenue. And when he told me that, the Holy Spirit that I had begged to help me showed up on that day and told him, I told the psychiatrist what to do with his shock treatment, because I knew it would destroy my brain. And they were doing that to people in those days, which I didn't know until years later. I read it in the book after, but at the time, it was just the Spirit, my Spirit, the Holy Spirit, digging deep and saying, don't do that.
And, Carey, can I ask one more?
Sure,
was it just fortuitous that after that visit, you got in the streetcar, went down Canal Street, and you saw a protest happening for civil rights, and that kind of started your journey in the civil rights movement? Is that the story?
I was on a streetcar. I was going to catch the Dumaine bus to go home, and in the mind of a child, I thought, well, let me get into this movement, the Black Civil Rights Movement, because there'll be a gay movement. There wasn't even the word gay back then. But I knew I had to take care of the Black Civil Rights Movement, and I offered a guy to take his picket sign and said, you want to take a break? And he said, sure. I said, I'll carry that for a while. And I started in front of Maison Blanche, headed toward the river. And a white woman accosted me and said, you're not doing anything but causing trouble. You ought to be home helping your mother, your mama. That's the way she put it. And I headed toward the other direction, and a white woman spit on me and called me poor white trash, which I found sort of like, it made me comfortable, because I said, they don't know what the hell I am and don't understand me. So it really helped me move on.
Larry, this is a little bit of taking you out of that story, but we talk about a lot of current issues and everything, and I know that there's a lot of young people that I talk to who want to know what they can do about today. And that episode that you just talked about kind of references something that I try and instill in them. Find your moment in today and what you can protest, what you can do to be part of the resistance, because this is your moment to do that. Like you said, the civil rights movement was a thing then you had gay rights and other things come. But this is a movement about people's human rights and the like, and just don't stand by on the sidelines and say, woe is me. You can tell them it was pretty tough to stand up for being black or whatever back in those days. So, well,
it's a great release if people don't realize that. I've been in 3 protests. I ran into Ernie recently at a protest down at Armstrong Park. And I need those protests just to get it out of me, to scream in the street and say, we're not going to stand this. And these young people need to realize that you need to pick something. If your gift is writing letters, write letters to the paper, write letters to your congressman. Whatever gift you have, use that gift to move us along in this era of hate coming from this present administration, trying to divide us. We ought to be trying to pull ourselves together.
We are with Larry Bagneris, and Larry's book is called Call Me Larry, A Creole Man's Triumph Over Racism and Homophobia. Urge everybody.
Fabulous book.
Go get this book. We'll promote it a little bit where you can get it in a bit here. But it's such an important book in today's times. And so, Larry, you also had a Houston connection in your activism. Talk a little bit about what happened there.
Well, I had a Houston connection because when I graduated from Xavier, who had a wonderful placement program, I had 2 job offers, one in Chicago and one in Houston. And I had gone to Houston, and my dad said, I'm not going to tell you what to do, son, but the $3,000-$4,000 they're going to offer you in Chicago, it's going to be eaten up by the cost of living. I'd already made up my mind I was going to Houston anyway. It was close enough. They had just put in the interstate freeway. It wasn't complete yet, but it took 6 hours to get back and forth. Mm-hmm. I arrived in Houston and began to meet people in the gay community that I didn't even know there was a gay community, but I met some guy that I went to work for Foley's department store. And my boss was gay, and I didn't realize that. And he invited me to a social, and I met other people there as well. And I decided to throw a big Halloween party, being from New Orleans. And talk about a real party. Everybody, about 150 people showed up. My apartment was too small, so the thing went out into the patio. And I began to dream of a community that we could help each other and get around with. And what happened to me was I went to, my baby sister came, I was working at Foley, and they had their Thanksgiving Day parade.
Larry, hold that thought.
Hey, Larry, hold your thought.
We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Not a problem.
I'm Grant Sasheret.
And I'm Ro Brown.
Please join us for the Sports Report Wednesdays and Fridays
at 8 p.m. on WBOK.
The Sports Report. WBOK 1230 AM.
Hey, WBOK, Ron Richardson here, host of a new show called Conversations with Ron Richardson. Join me every Saturday live from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. as we sit down and discuss mental health, disability, drug addiction, and everyday life issues. If you're ready to have a real conversation, let's get it started, New Orleans, every Saturday from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. right here on WBOK and streaming worldwide on WBOK1230.com.
Hey, this is Steve Poston. Be sure to listen to WBOK 1230 AM every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. and Sunday evening at 5 p.m., bringing you the best Southern Soul barroom music with the Southern Soul Weekend Party Mix, hosted by me, of course. I'll be playing your favorite Southern Soul music by artists from all over the South, right here on WBOK 1230 AM or online at WBOK1230.com. The station you listen to longer. Listen to longer. Listen to longer.
Hi, I'm Leo Jackson, host of Sunday Gospel here every Sunday morning, 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. and 12 o'clock till 2 p.m. You don't want to miss this move of God. It happens only on WBOK. You listen to all day long.
WBOK, online at WBOK1230.com.
The Arnie and Carey Show with Arnie Philco and Cary Grant.
And we are back with a great guest, Larry Bagneris. Larry, I had to cut you off, unfortunately. We had a break. But if you can go back into your story.
Yes, I was working for Foley's and thought it would be great. My family would come and visit me almost twice, 3 times a month. We were a very close family. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why I wrote the book was to salute my mom and dad, who were incredible parents.
Absolutely.
And so I brought my baby sister there. She's not a baby anymore. She's a emergency room medical doctor, and I'm really proud of her. And she was about 8 years old, and she's watching what to me was like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It was the Foley's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Mm-hmm. And the third float went by, and she looked up at me, and she said, "This is boring." And I, for a child, I thought, wow. She said, they're not throwing anything. I don't want nobody to wave at me. I want somebody to throw me something. In that instance, I thought, this would be a wonderful idea for the gay community to have a parade. And it wasn't until 10 years later that I was in a position with the political caucus of Houston to come up with a concept. Now, the reason why I came up with a concept about a parade was not only to celebrate being gay, but there was everything I'd been to learn about the gay civil rights movement was a protest.
Right.
I went back to New York for almost 7 years, every Pride, except in 1972, I went to San Francisco, and they had a parade, and they had 2 floats, and what I didn't like was they had people on the float that didn't have any clothes on, and I thought, this is not a gay rights movement, this is ridiculous. And so I put together a parade in Houston and took a lot of insults from the police chief. He would meet with me, but I had the support of Congressman Mickey Leland and a city council person, Judson Robinson Jr., who insisted that someone would talk with me. They had me sit down with the assistant chief of police, Chief Bankston, and after insulting me, he said, what's a nice Mexican boy like you? That's why I used the word Creole on the front of the book. I said, I'm not Mexican, I'm black. And he said, you mean I've got a nigger, a wetback, and a queer in my office?
Oh, God.
And at that time, the phone rang, and the woman that went with me put her fingernails in my leg, and I said, no, I'm walking out of here with this permit, so don't worry about me. I can handle this. I've had those insults before. And we walked out after going back and forth on several of different occasions and items, which was like, no, we've got a ban, and he insulted that. And then I said, we have female impersonators, and he insulted that. And all that's in the book. And I said that day we walked out, and he said, you got your permit. The difference is he thought we were going to have a parade they could handle with 2 cop cars, one in the front and one in the back. And 10,000 people showed up in Houston, a multicultural crowd that celebrated that day for the first Pride Parade in 1979 in June. Actually, it was on July 1st of 1979 in Houston, Texas.
Wow, that's great. That's absolutely
That's a
great.
great story. The other story that I
want to also point out that parade wasn't about just throwing beads. That parade was about putting the community on parade so that people could see the numerous churches we had, that the MCC was pro-gay, there were several other denominations, the Sports Association, of course the bars, which was like the black church for the black movement. The gay bars were the place where people met one another and organized and put forward, raised money. They paid for a lot of things like the parade. They made the floats. So it wasn't just, and we set up tables to register voters. We were always, at that time, controlling 10 precincts in the Montrose area. After that parade, we were controlling about 20 precincts across the city of Houston in the Montrose area where most of the gay community lived. And most of the people that lived in the Montrose area were former hippies. And that's why it was so difficult to get the parade permit, because there were rules and regulations to keep the hippie community from protesting the war back in the day in the 60s.
Larry, another story that is in your book deals with attending the Democratic Convention, National Convention, as the first and only openly gay.
No.
Is that right, or I have that wrong?
From Texas. There were several delegates. As a matter of fact, my experience with that, it was something I always watched the Republican and Democratic convention because I was always involved, always wanted to be involved in politics. And I thought that was my first step toward running for public office in Houston, which was to move forward with the ability to get to know all these people in the neighborhood, get to know all the people in what was called at that time the GPC, the Gay Political Caucus. It's now the Gay Lesbian and Political Caucus. And so that was my first process of understanding that. And I put a booklet together for all the delegates from Texas, large delegation that had simple questions like, what is a homosexual? Can you know a person is a homosexual? And that word I hated because it was just not, it turned my stomach. It still does today. But the gay community, the other gay people that were involved, there was several other delegates from many other cities. So there was about 100 and something delegates at that particular convention, where we nominated Jimmy Carter to be reelected. But I was a Kennedy delegate. I learned from that process. Sometimes what you might want, you might destroy what you have. So I think twice before I make those kind of movements now today.
Got it. Well, let's move it forward a little bit to New Orleans, because obviously you came back to your hometown. You actually ran for office a couple times, right?
Right.
Yes, I did. I ran against Jackie Clarkson for city council. We, in a primary, got in a runoff. I lost the runoff. She was definitely adamant about me. I remember being on television with her, and my cousin Warren Bell was managing not a debate, but just an interview. And she kept pointing out I was gay. And my response to her was, what does that have to do? I've got a 20-year business record that I've traveled all over the country. I worked for my corporation for 20 years, and nobody wanted to hear that. Everything in the paper was gay, 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 gay. So one of the interesting things that happened was the night before the primary, the TV station, Channel 4, wanted to interview me, and I said, I'm not doing any more interviews. And my dad said, son, do this one for me. I said, look, I'm not doing this. Everything is gay, gay, gay. They don't pay attention to all the work that I did in corporate America. They don't pay attention to my community work. All they want to do is gay, 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 gay. And he said, he took me to my apartment around a corner in the quarter, and he set me down and he said, son, I really want you to do this one for me. So we arrived back at the campaign headquarters after I put on a different suit and tie, and all the cameras show up, and the first question they asked was, how does it feel to be a gay candidate running for public office? And my dad stepped up and said, let me answer that. And he answered them really well. I was so proud of my father.
Larry, let me ask you this before we get any deeper into New Orleans. We got to talk about New Orleans, but please talk about your family. I mean, I found that part the most heartwarming part of the book, your descriptions of your mother.
I was so lucky to
meant
be
a lot
born
to me.
in a multiracial family.
Yeah.
If you read the book, you'll find out what a Creole is. And the reason why I put Creole in there, I'm not running for my blackness. I'm trying to collect now my because I'm 65% European and 31% African and 4% West Asian, which is part Palestinian. I understand why my blood pressure goes up when people are discriminated against, okay? Yeah. Because all those people I'm a representative of. But I had a mother and father that dedicated everything themselves to their family. My father worked 2 jobs, and during the Mardi Gras season, he worked 3. And my mom was a housewife. Yeah. But they produced my brother, Vernell, who's a remarkable artist.
Right.
But people talk about his art, the fact that he made movies and he did shows. What they don't talk about is the hundreds of artists that he took out of here and exposed to Europe and everywhere all over the world on the map, and gave them good jobs and good pay and had them see a different side of the world so that their children would grow up better. Yeah. And talk about my sister that spent 50 years in the Orleans Parish school system and taught all these kids. When we were on the campaign trail, many of them would go around saying Miss LaFonta, that's Joanne LaFonta.
Yeah.
And they would say, Miss LaFonta, Miss LaFonta. They remembered her and how kind she was and how she put her heart into her teaching. And then I mentioned my baby sister.
Yeah.
That's a physician. So my parents worked hard and made a lot of sacrifice for their kids to be successful. But raising us in a racist environment, there are stories in the book about my dad and I riding on a Haynes bus going to Lincoln Beach, and that seat behind the driver was empty. And I looked up at him. Must have been about 9 years old, and I said, why can't we sit on that seat? And he said, you don't want to sit there. That's a hot seat. That's where the wheels are, under the bus. and that seat's hot, and you can feel a breeze coming in. So they were always remarkable about giving us positive images of stuff that could have been
Very
an
negative.
impact on our character or on our feeling of self-worth. They kept us positive always.
It's great.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about New Orleans, because I met you, when we moved here, and because of the work that you did for the city for so many years, especially as the leader of the New Orleans Human Relations Commission. Talk about that role and what it meant to you, and a little bit what the HRC did.
Yeah, that was the best job I ever had in my life, because I woke up every morning knowing I could make a difference in people's lives. It started out with 10 years of volunteer under Sidney Bartholomew as a volunteer for the HRC. As a member of HRC, I was appointed by Bartholomew, Sidney. And then when Sidney left, I made sure I had as many recommendations as possible. I learned the process and wanted to do the job. And I went to Mark Morial and he said, I've never seen anybody come in my office so well prepared with all these recommendations. He said to me, you got the job. So I started the job, I think, May 1st, 2000, and lasted 18 years.
Wow.
Some of the work we did was outreach to all the communities, particularly the religious community. Like after 9/11, we did a lot of outreach to the Muslim community to make them realize they were safe here. We even had a march from City Hall to Gallia Hall to make them know that everybody was supporting them. And Christians, Muslims, and Jews all marched together. We did a lot of work with the day laborers that came here after Katrina, that the Bush administration brought here and then forgot about once they were gone. The problems with that community was they didn't speak English very well, and so I had Eva Hurst, who now runs the Americans with Disabilities program. She volunteered to meet me every morning at 7 o'clock, go all the Lowe's and Home Depots, and interact with these people and see what their problem was. And one of their problems was they didn't want to go in restaurants to eat lunch because they were dirty. They were climbing up on rooftops, or they didn't feel like they would be comfortable in a restaurant, and they figured people would reject them for that. So I got with the city council, and I had them the idea of having the food trucks come in. And when businesses gave me problems, I went visit with the businesses and said, look, these guys could come in your restaurant if you want, but they're dirty from working their hearts out. And you guys, just let's give it a 3-month trial and see how it works. After that, everybody was happy about that. But they were also not getting paid, what I learned when I was on the street. One guy came up to me and he said, I don't need any more y'all. I had baseball caps and a pair of shorts on. I said, I'm not a pair of shorts. I said, I'm not one of them. I work for the mayor's office. I work for Ray Nagin. And I said, you're ripping these people off and you're not paying them. He said, get out of my face. I said, no, I'm going to the mayor's office and I'm going to pull your contract. He had 3 contracts and I pulled them. Oh. And I explained to the mayor what he was doing. He was making these people work and not paying them. Upon hearing that, Eva put me in touch with Lutz Molinas at Loyola University that had a group of students that were bilingual who were studying to be lawyers, and we put a group together that would hear their cases at a clinic on Carrollton Avenue, and then I set it up with Monique Morial and the First City Court. There was 4 judges in that court system that would have court once a month, in Spanish with interpreters, and we returned almost $600,000 to 1,600 people in back pay. Wow. And that program still goes on because the Loyola students volunteered to take the cases, interpret them, and then file them before the judge so that they could get paid. Because I took on 20 cases on my own, and people looked at me like, who are you? I'm not paying them. They're here illegally. I said, well, they weren't here illegally when you had your roof done or your building painted or your plumbing done, and now you want to not pay them. So I had no clout to make a difference in that area. That's just some of the things we did on a daily basis. We got complaints from citizens that had either been insulted at front desks of hotels. Remember, this wasn't 2000. This was 1990 to 2000, and these cases were coming in. And I learned that process from 1990 to 2000. So when I became executive director, I wanted to jump on the case right away and solve it and resolve it by mediation, not by court orders. The only way to make people understand each other. New Orleans is a great melting pot. We've shown that to the world. You don't slap people on the hand. You bring them inside and let them face their accuser and explain to each other what they went through, and that way they understand it. We solved a lot of cases in the city on race, people being fired just because they were gay, et cetera. So, it was the best job I ever had.
Well, I got to say, through Larry's help and through the HRC, one of the ordinances that I authored that I'm most proud of was the wage theft bill or ordinance out of the city council for just the things Larry's talking about after Katrina, where day laborers coming here from other countries were just being ripped off, by people, not being paid. It was unbelievably bad. And, I know a lot of people have different thoughts on immigration and such, but the reality is New Orleans today would not be what it is, had it not been for some of the folks that came from other countries who helped us get back on our feet and deserve to be, compensated for the work that they did. And Larry, you were such a big help.
Well, you need to be paid for the work you do, and I think what touched me as I began to examine my family's background is on my mother's side. Her mother was from Honduras and her father was from Guatemala. And on my daddy's side, his mom was from France and my grandfather was from Haiti. So that blend made the Creole community on my side. But if you look throughout New Orleans in that Seventh Ward community, you're going to find all that diversity. And I'm sure when they came here, I'm the third generation. So when they came here, I'm sure they caught as much flack and wind up in a Seventh Ward that was much more accepting because it was a diverse community.
Larry, could you talk a little bit about Southern Decadence, which has become a huge festival here and an economic engine? And I know you had a lot to do with making sure that became what it became. And just can you, for the audience's edification, let us know a little bit about that.
That was again under Reagan when Grant Storm decided to march on the gay communities and try and get us to riot. And I put together about 50 kids. People come to New Orleans and they think they can do what they want to do. And I put 50 kids out, volunteer kids out there with flashlights. And we put ads in the paper, in the gay papers, and said, if you show anything below the belt buckle, you're going to jail. And we're not going to put up with it. Don't expose yourself here, and don't do anything you wouldn't do Atlanta and New York and New Jersey, etc. I was very adamant because what I've seen in other cities, you don't do that, so don't do it here. And so after that particular encounter, Grant Storm marched from Armstrong Park to up Rampart Street, but I had hung the rainbow flags, and to tee him off. And when I knew I had him is when he said, and tell the mayor to take down these rainbow flags. I thought, well, I got him that time. And that had never been done before. And I've been doing that for the last 25 years because it sets the tone that if you're going to come into this community, behave yourself or don't come. And so we hang them every June to celebrate Pride, and they stay there through Southern Decadence. And it's a reminder to our Southern Decadence visitors. I even put in a concert to give them something to do, because if you're just hanging around and you're drinking liquor, you forget where you are. You're in the streets of New Orleans. So we put it together a welcome reception on Friday, a concert on Saturday, and then a traditional parade on Sunday. And what it has changed completely because it's become a celebration of the culture and the music of the gay community rather than something with lewd behavior.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of what the volunteers did to make this festival what it is today, and the cooperation of all the bars in the gay community, actually in the community in general, because everybody wants a piece of this money that comes in. So you go everywhere in the quarter doing Southern Decadence, everybody's hanging a rainbow flag up, and most people that are not from here don't know. Because there's a rainbow flag, that don't mean that's a gay establishment. But everybody's very laid back and enjoying themselves. They don't care where they are, but as long as you behave yourself, you're fine. And I had one guy that in the middle of the street urinating, and I said to him, "Don't do that. There's a bathroom right inside of there." And he just kept it up. I said to the cop, "Arrest him." I went to get the cop. I said, "Arrest him." And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. And I thought, you don't do this in Atlanta, and you don't do it in Chicago, you don't do it in San Francisco.
Right.
Damn it, don't do it here.
Larry,
cleaned it up.
Before we go to break and with the end of the segment with you, just tell us about where we can get the book, how people can buy it. I recommend it highly to any New Orleanian particularly because you have lived a fantastic life and put yourself out there for good causes. Just give us a breakdown of how we can get the book. You can buy it at the Historic New Orleans Collection on Royal Street. I'm real proud that they published my book, and I went through that process, which I'd never done. Or you can call the one where you call and order stuff. Amazon?
It's my
Amazon.
Amazon?
Amazon will have it in one day because I had a friend that I said, call Amazon and you can get the book and just ask. And it's on one of the front pages of Amazon because it's selling really well. Oh, and by the way, every dime of this money is going to PFLAG because I want some more judges and lawyers and some more Buddha judges, politicians to make this community healthy and to protect us.
Thank you so much.
Everybody, go buy.
Thank you so much, Larry, for being on the show. I appreciate it. And we'll have you back soon. We definitely will. We'll be right back. We're going to take a short break. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Norman Robinson is back.
Can you hear me now?
And he's taking no prisoners.
Can you hear me now?
Each weekday, Norman Robinson brings you commentary with Off the Top.
The incident was shocking, disturbing, disgusting, disappointing, and sad.
Each weekday, Off the Top with Norman Robinson is heard exclusively right here.
It's Off the Top with Norman Robinson on WBOK 1230 AM. WBOK.
Better pay attention.
Powered by Cox Business.
The Arnie and Carey Show with Arnie Philco and Cary Grant.
And we are back. This is Arnie and Carey. Let's Elevate show.
That was a great interview, Carey.
Absolutely.
With really one of the great guys of our community.
Arnie,
Larry
the thing
Bagnares.
about it, like you said before, I mean, sometimes these things, we could use up all the time. We have the stories in Larry's book are incredible. His journeys around the world and everything that he's done. He's truly one of those pioneers that is very much like some of the civil rights icons and other people that we talk about and people know from the history books. And I think he'll be one of those people as well in later years. But he's here now and he has those stories to tell, and people should definitely get the book and read it. It's very eye-opening, very enlightening, and shows you what a great man he is.
Yeah, and we need more of Larry's today. I have to tell you, when I was in city government, and you've been there much longer than I have, he was always one of the really bright spots. I always enjoyed seeing him and talking to him because he always stood for what was right. And whether you were African American, whether you were LGBTQ plus, whether you were Muslim, Jewish, it didn't matter. If there was equity that needed to be found, Larry was one of those guys that would always be standing up, and he always have such great admiration for him.
He always kept a great sense of humor. I mean, he was always we spent a lot of time at council meetings. He represented issues and I represented budget issues, and we were there a lot of times for a long periods of time. I got to know him pretty well, and he always, no matter what he was facing, no matter what fights there were out there, he always kept a positive attitude. Like he said, I'm sure that came from how he was raised in his family, and that I always admired that, because, like you said, some of his issues were tough and Gordian, not unsolvable, but he always stood up for the right thing and fought the good fight.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I gotta do a shout out, because we didn't have time to talk about it, but one of Larry's mentors in some ways, I think he was the chairman of the HRC, was Rabbi Ed Cohn, who you remember from Temple Sinai. And there was an article over the weekend. Rabbi Cohn, who's been retired, for some years, he's on his way to Atlanta to be near family, and I exchanged correspondence over the weekend with him. We're going to miss him. He like Larry, always stood for what was right, and wasn't afraid to voice his opinion when things were not right. And another great leader in our community. So, Carey, in the minutes we got left, we only got a few minutes, just I thought a few things to talk about. I wanted to follow from a topic that was on the Gerard show today, which is this renewal of the millage for the sheriff's office.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to also scratch my head. Number one, there are kind of opposing signs now in the streets of New Orleans.
Yeah.
One saying basically support the millage. It's not a new tax; it's a renewal.
Right.
And then another set of signs saying, don't support new taxes. Well, as it was said on the show earlier before ours on Gerard, this is not a new tax. This is a renewal of a tax.
Yes.
And again, I'm not sure who's responsible for the message on the new. I'm trying to convince people that it's new tax, but it's not. And
it's not.
Look, no matter how you feel about the operations of the sheriff's office or who you might support in the next election, the reality is we need this. The city will be in a really bad position.
Yes.
If this millage does not pass. So I urge people, because we're in early voting right now.
Yeah.
Get informed, know what the renewal is about, know where the money's going to, and at least from my perspective, Carey, cast a yes vote.
Absolutely.
I think there really should not be much debate about this.
No, there shouldn't, and it's very disingenuous what people are saying about it being a new tax. This thing has been on the books for, I'd say, hundreds of years, but not hundreds, but it's been on forever, as long as I was around. And it's basically the core operating funds that the sheriff has generated for years. If those funds aren't from this millage, they have to come from somewhere. The sheriff already asked the city for lots of funds, and these funds will also be asked for from the city. So that will still be coming out of your pocket as a taxpayer or whatever. It's not like you're going to get free and clear because this millage doesn't pass. It's a rather small millage. You probably don't even notice it in your tax bill per month, per year, whatever the actual dollar amount of it, because it's one of those numbers that's much further down at the bottom of how the breakdown is. But like you said, Arnie, this is vital to the sheriff's operations. Doesn't matter how you feel about the current sheriff, former sheriffs, whatever, or whoever's running for office. They all will need this funding. No matter who wins, no matter what happens, this funding is needed. And I think it's very sad that we have a disingenuous campaign when people should just be saying, just renew the millage so that we don't have to go through another financial crisis with another organization. And that's all.
Yeah, I'm curious who's behind the signage here, because again, most of the candidates for sheriff have
come out,
expressed their opinion in support.
Yeah, they would have. Yes. I'm with you on it. It's very baffling. Other than, just some anti-tax people who are not showing their faces, but I don't see anybody really representing and saying, why this shouldn't be passed. And because even in some of the literature that we saw online, at home, we saw that the people who talking about getting rid of it basically explained what it's for and then said get rid of it. But the explanation never said other than we don't want to pay this tax. Why would we get rid of it?
Yeah, and people may want to remember, again, irrespective of the politics, people may want to remember that we went through this whole debate for a couple of years about the need for expansion of the jail and the mental health facility that eventually got approved. Right. And it was kind of forced upon both the sheriff and a lot of other people through federal orders here.
Right.
So this money is really needed. Understand that if the millage does not pass, we can't just throw people out. Okay, I mean we have we have people that are awaiting trial that are prisoners. There's a constitutional requirement to take care of them, including mental health needs. So the money's going to come either way, as you said, either through the general budget or it's going to come through the millage. And I would just urge people, again, don't be fooled of some, new tax argument. This is not a new tax. It's the renewal of a millage. And, like renewals of millage, assess it, may form your own opinion. But it seems to me this is something we pretty much desperately need.
Yeah, this is very much like a few years ago, the renewal and change of the library millage came up, and you had a few murmurings about it, but it was the same issue. It was just a renewal of something that was needed for the library's operation. So you went out and voted for that. So this is very much the same thing. I think that it would hurt very much as a former budget person. It would really cause a crisis where we don't have one. And I think that just to impress upon people, it's in a very small election, bad timing, all the things that happen with these things. But just like what happened with the constitutional amendments, if you show up, this can be taken care of. A vote yes is absolutely the right way to go.
Absolutely. So people go out in early voting and cast your vote. You could certainly wait until Saturday election day, but let me be honest, Saturday election day is second weekend Jazz Fest.
Yeah.
Lots going to be going on. So go cast your vote now. This is an important issue, I think, for our community. We're going to come back tomorrow night.
Yes.
I got some new news I want to share with everybody about the NOLA Walk of Fame.
All right.
Be an interesting topic, so we'll talk about that tomorrow night. But great show, Carey.
Yes.
Thank you, Larry Bagneris, for being our guest and for all you do. And look forward to being with you back tomorrow night, 6 o'clock.
Good night, everybody. Talk to you on the radio tomorrow.
WBOK online.